Hi mamas! I want to talk about catastrophizing today, and if that's something that you do, should you be worried? Is it a sign of mental illness or is it just a normal coping mechanism picked up in childhood? Let's unpack that. So, what does catastrophizing mean? It means making a catastrophe out of something that isn't objectively a catastrophe. It means making basically a mountain out of a molehill and creating a lot more anxiety and stress for yourself than is objectively necessary. However, if we put it in the context of a developmental trauma that was experienced during childhood, then I think it gives us a bit of a little different spin on things. So if you were a child that grew up in an environment where you were made to feel responsible in a way that you shouldn't have, for example, responsible for your parents' moods, responsible for your siblings' welfare, responsible for perhaps your parents' welfare, then this is a big deal. That wasn't catastrophizing anything. That was feeling the weight of responsibility on your tiny shoulders, which at the time would have felt like life or death. Because if a child is excluded from the family dynamic and is no longer attached to the family dynamic, then that feels like death, and it could be death, because for a child not to be in the family unit, how are they going to survive? How are they going to survive by themselves? So in order to choose attachment, that meant that these children, perhaps you, would have had to continue with this feeling of responsibility. They couldn't have shirked the responsibility. That was theirs to carry, and that may well have felt catastrophic. So I'll give you some examples. Perhaps you witnessed your parents arguing, screaming at each other, maybe even hitting each other. A lot of children feel desperately responsible for this, and a lot of my clients have felt that they were responsible for breaking these fights up, that it was up to them to save their mother or father, either from harming themselves or each other, or from harming themselves through driving under the influence or escaping under the influence or doing something crazy to escape the situation. So these clients weren't catastrophizing. To a child, that's a huge deal. Not only were you responsible for breaking up this fight, but you were responsible for your parents' life or death, in essence. That's how it would have felt to you as a child. And if you didn't do it, and if you were rejected from the family unit, again, this would have felt catastrophic, because how would you survive without them? So that's one example. Another example is if you were left alone at home and the person in charge of you wasn't actually responsible and was either sleeping or didn't care about your food needs, and you had to look after your siblings, or perhaps you had to drive your siblings to school and back. Perhaps you felt too much in control at too young an age. Again, this would have felt hugely stressful at the time. You would have done it because there was no other option. But that's not catastrophizing. It wasn't a catastrophe that you had to look after your siblings, but it would have felt like that for you as a child because the responsibility was too great for you. So if you went through childhood feeling responsible for your parents' emotions, for their actions, for breaking them up, or for your siblings' welfare, then this would have installed a pattern of almost catastrophizing because you had to be on hyper alert. You had to be aware and alert to any kind of drama or emotional volatility that may have been coming around the corner. That's why catastrophizing actually would have served you. It would have helped you to remain in that state of high alert, which you needed to protect yourself, perhaps to protect your parents and to protect your siblings. So as adults, if we've been wired to be on high alert and wired to be expecting some kind of danger, emotional or physical, or some kind of drama that we're not sure how we're going to cope with, then of course we carry that on into adulthood. And it means that we may see the worst case scenario in things, or we may catastrophize things. But that's actually just a way of protecting ourselves. It's not something that says that you're mentally ill. It's not necessarily disordered thinking or irrational thinking. Based on your life experiences as a child, it was very rational thinking. It was the clever thing to do to prepare yourself for what might be happening next. So if you catastrophize now, if you know that you tend to feel far more anxious about things than you should be, that your reaction is perhaps disproportionate to what you know is actually the reality of things, then think back to your childhood. Is this something that you had to feel as a child? Is this something that you regularly felt, that you needed to be on high alert, that you need to be on your guard, just in case there was some scary or dramatic or unpredictable thing that might happen in future? In which case, that's when you were wired to think like this. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't have a mental illness. You were just wired to think this way as a child. How can you fix this? Well, first of all, you can realize that this was wired into you as a child. And secondly, that you can unwire it. Just because it was a wiring that was put in place when you did need to be on high alert, it doesn't mean you need to be on high alert now. Now you are no longer a child. Now you are able to take responsibility. You can make your inner child feel safe and loved and supported in the way that she wasn't before. And I do that through inner child work. There are lots of other techniques out there, but for me, inner child work has been the most effective method that I've tried, and it certainly works with my clients. So you can work with your inner child. You can recognize that the threat that you felt when you were little is no longer there, that you don't need to catastrophize anymore because you don't need that coping mechanism. So if you're doing it, recognize it, understand where it's from, and tackle the root cause by helping your inner child to understand that she's no longer responsible. She's no longer on her own with these deeply scary feelings that did feel life or death. The catastrophe was real, but it's not real anymore, and she is safe now. So I hope that helped. I hope any of you that are catastrophizers no longer feel that there's something wrong with you or that you're broken. This is all down to developmental trauma picked up when you were a child. So if you want any more tips or tools on inner parenting your inner child, helping her to feel safe, understanding why you act the way that you do, check out my website, laviniabrown.com. Lots more blogs and vlogs on this kind of thing. And of course, if you want personalized support, I'm here for you. Please just reach out and book a free discovery session. I would love to help you explore your past and heal it so that you can be the mama, wife, and woman that you deserve to be.